what is going on with Johnny Walker, because this is not the Johnny Walker, we saw. Because what is he? He's barely close to. He's a little over a year into his UFC career, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And so he did great in his first outings, but now he's lost his last two. One in spectacular fashion, and then this one in a level of fashion where it almost looked like he just should not have been in the octagon with that guy, with Krylov, who put on a fantastic performance, I have to say. The guy was just so technical in his grappling. It was truly beautiful. And I gotta say, man, Johnny Walker was just outclassed in that fight. And so
you ever seen somebody do the worm so hard that it ruins their career?
It's Johnny Walker, isn't it?
It's Johnny Walker.
Yeah, because he hurt himself in early 2019 doing something dislocated his shoulder doing the worm after a fight. Now be honest with me.
He won and immediately dislocated his shoulder showing off.
Be honest with me. Do you genuinely believe that has had a significant impact on...
Psychologically, yes.
Psychologically, really? Okay. To what effect? Explain. Elaborate.
I think just how it's I don't think that necessarily that is the thing that ruined his entire career. Just that. I think that was just a catalyst for the events that have followed.
Very interesting. Yeah, because
he's celebrating, immediately broke his shoulder, then had to recover from that, train for another fight against Corey Anderson, who was just not having it that day.
Yeah, he was having a bad day.
He was just not taking no for an answer that day.
Yeah.
And then, after having overcome those two injuries, he won that fight, but it kind of felt like he lost after he was given that interview where he felt like such a dummy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just that, and then the kind of humiliation that you would feel after those two things happening, and then training for this next fight, not knowing if it's going to go your way or not, or if you're going to be made a fool again, and then it happening like all your worst fears happening because you're just getting outclassed.
I think I have a picture pulled up of Johnny Walker right before he fell to the ground when he did his worm, before he dislocated his shoulder. But here's the thing. Okay, so here's the thing.
Here's the thing.
When I was so Johnny Walker, I know he's talented. He's a talented kind of guy. And so one of the things I was, and I'm bringing this up just for the sake of discussion, really, because I think it's interesting to really study what's going on with Johnny Walker right now. It's okay, so where was he? Where was he mentally after his loss to Corey Anderson, going into this fight with Krylov? And
exactly.
That he was really somewhere where, in a position where Corey Anderson, ironically, would end up against Blachowicz, with someone who was just really focused on future events rather than focusing on, the game that they have now. And so I know for a fact that going into the fight with Krylov, I've got it pulled up on the screen here. It's actually a really good article. I suggest anybody read just to really understand what it is that Johnny Walker has been implementing in his regiment, to train himself. And he's been, training with. He's been working under the coach of. Well, I want to say, positively speaking, he has been training with George St. Pierre out of the TriStar gyms. And that's great. Kudos. If you can get trained by arguably the greatest of all time, then good for you. You're doing great. However, he's being coached by forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. Firas Zahabi. It's Georgia's coach, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Yes. So yes. Did I say unfortunately? I did not mean that. Basically, yes. This is great because Johnny Walker is now being backed and supported by a division of talent that is responsible for one of the greatest of all time. And it's good that he was training with these guys after his unfortunate, unfortunate outing with his previous coach, who he was with in the Corey Anderson bout. But yes, so he went into this. He got Johnny Walker got brand new management in Paradigm, the company that, or it's more publicity, I guess I should say, rather than management. But it's the same company that boasts Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya, and Chris Cyborg as some of their clients. And so yeah, and so he signed with them for representation, and he's been working with one of the greatest of all time and the greatest of all time's coach, and he has,
Does that make him the greatest coach of all time?
It's still up for debate. But he was working on trying to make himself a more well-rounded fighter. To really work on certain things like his takedown defense and other things.
Really worked.
Exactly. But also, don't forget to stay focused on his. Oh, excuse me. But also stay focused on his unique and energetic style of striking, which is something that they wanted to, stay natural with and not really interfere that base, fighting style. However, that said, now knowing all those things leading up to the fight, the real thing we have to ask ourselves is what happened in the fight that led to, spoiler alert, Johnny Walker's defeat to Nikita Krylov, or Krylov, if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Just let me know in the comments. Because when you watch the fight, you almost kind of say to yourself, what is Johnny Walker doing? In the sense of you notice he's not taking advantage of certain positions. It seems he's a little uncomfortable on the blow. It looked like he was getting a little gassed out pretty easily. Kudos to him for going 3 rounds in a fight. If I'm not mistaken, it's the first time he's gone the distance in a fight. Could be wrong, but
I think most of them were pretty short.
Yeah, because I know leading up to his fights with Corey Anderson in the UFC, he had, I think, most of his fights didn't make it past 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that. I remember some stat like that.
Yeah, and so he lost that fight genuinely because his grappling was just not up to par, and his ability to do scrambles, his ability to engage in somewhat basic submissions, I have to say, was kind of astounding, because if one of his main goals was to keep it standing, then his takedown defense didn't necessarily reflect that. He was having a hard time getting his back off the cage, and he was having a hard time keeping his opponent at a preferable distance that favored Walker's own striking, because even when it came to on the feet, it almost seemed like Krylov was outpacing him a little bit, and it was very interesting to say the least, because you wouldn't expect that kind of performance from someone like Johnny Walker. And I mean, not to say that it was embarrassing, because I don't want to go that drastic, but it was definitely kind of visibly noticeable where Johnny Walker is now in terms of some of the high levels of competition, because he's
but he's also still new and still young, so it's possible after these 2 losses, he could skyrocket, he could get even better.
Yeah, because...
So this is one of the things where we're seeing somebody very early in their career already starting to take a few steps back, so we'll see if he starts running or not soon.
Yeah, because he's still young, he's still 27. So he's got a lot, he's got a lot to go for. Forward to, I should say. And I have yet another article. Lo and behold, I've pulled up here where it's just basically an interview. It went up today. It's just about Johnny Walker. Saying that this loss isn't the end; it's just the beginning for me, and that's good. That's a great attitude to go into it with. Really happy for him. Hopefully, he said he's going to continue his training at TriStar. So hopefully that works out for him.
Gets better then.
Do what?
The longer he spends with GSP and GSP's coach and at that academy that has a lot of great people there, I'm sure we'll just see him keep getting better. For, maybe not at his full potential yet, but we'll see how much better he can get,
Yeah, because some people would even say that George St. Pierre is one of the best grapplers in UFC history, so being able to train under him is going to be great, especially if George St. Pierre can give him some. I've heard he was giving him some tips, he was giving Walker tips in how to fight from the cage, defend himself with his back against the cage. I don't know where that training was this past Saturday. My heart kind of goes out to him. Yeah, it just hasn't really clicked. And you got to keep in mind this article.
He's still not used to it versus he's also still not used to having matches that last more than a minute.
Yeah, and this article I referenced earlier, talking about his lead up to the fight with Krylov, goes into pretty good detail about how Johnny Walker does a lot of traveling when it comes to his camps. Like, he does camps all over the place. He kind of doesn't stay in one place when it comes to his training, and part of me kind of wonders if that also takes a toll, that he's kind of doing a lot at once. He's not giving it enough time to sink in when it needs to. So there's a lot going on here, and really what it comes down to, what my co-host Lincoln said here, that it just hasn't clicked yet for Johnny Walker. Yet his wild and his unique striking has pretty much gotten him to the point where he's at right now in the UFC. And really, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong here, Lincoln, but I do believe that Johnny Walker is now at a position where he's reached the threshold of what it takes to be a top tier contender, and what it takes to be alongside these top tier guys. And now that he's at that threshold, he has to utilize more tools, and he has to grow as a fighter in order to develop the kind of skills necessary to deal with a very wide range of different fighters. So yeah, that's basically where I think he's at. What do you think?
I completely agree. He's just got to polish some stuff, and if he wants to succeed, he's got to get a little bit more technical with his chaos.
Exactly. So that's basically where Johnny Walker's at. I'm really interested to see where he goes in the future.